Hi, you're listening to Crossword, where cultural clues lead to the truth of the word. And my name is Michelle McAloon, your host. We have a great conversation with Dr. Carrie Gress about feminism and really its toxicity, its poison. We have toxic masculinity, but let's talk about toxic feminism. I hope this engenders a lot of discussion and a lot of thought. Please send your comments to bookclues.com. And if you will, tell a friend about my podcast, even if it makes you mad. All right. Happy listening. God bless. Hey, folks. Today we're going to have a conversation, and I hope it makes some people mad, to tell you the truth, because we're going to talk about the truth of feminism and its hollow promise. And we have none other than Professor Carrie Gress. She is a doctor. She is a PhD, a scholar at the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University of America. She is the founder and editor of the online women's magazine, theologyofhome.com. It's beautiful. You need to go look at it. I'll put a link on my show notes. She's the author of 10 books, including the Theology of Home series, the Anti-Mary Exposed, and The End of Woman. And today we are to talk about her book, Something Wicked, Why Feminism Can't Be Fused with Christianity, put out by the fabulous Sophia Institute Press. Welcome to the show, Dr. Gress.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I tell you, it's a real honor to have you here, and especially a woman of your stature and of your honesty. So let's talk about this. One of the lines you write in your book, feminism is women's attempt to gain security apart from God. And I thought it really kind of sums up your book. I'm going to ask you, why this book? Why now?
Yeah, no, great question. I started writing on this issue of feminism back in 2017, roughly thereabouts. And my book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, came out in 2018 rather. So I've been talking about it for a long time, almost 10 years. And when I initially wrote that book, I just started with the second wave, and I thought that the first wave was good. I even say that in that book, that the first wave had different intellectual principles, because that's what I had been assured by all the experts across a wide range of thinkers. I think this is pretty much what everybody thought. And then that book did so well that I had people saying, can you write another book that's more for Protestants, a little Protestant friendly, doesn't have Our Lady in it, or for people who are secular, because everybody's got people in their family that need to understand the problems with feminism. So that's when I wrote my book called The End of Woman, and that came out in 2023. And that was very much for a secular Judeo-Christian wide audience. But in that book, what I didn't do, I realized after the fact, was I didn't really put the nail in the coffin of, can Christianity and feminism actually coincide? Is there a way in which we can weave them together in a way that can be fruitful and helpful and beneficial to everybody? So I felt like there was this last remaining piece that I had to really grapple with. And that's really where this book, Something Wicked, came from, was that realization that this last piece hadn't been addressed at all.
Okay, so what you do a really good job of anchoring what is feminism in its intellectual history. And you do a beautiful job. You start at the beginning with a painting by Robert Duncanson, and you really kind of frame it in this very famous Black American painter. Can you explain to our listeners a little bit about this? Because this is kind of key to your whole story.
Yeah. No, I mean, the cover is one of the Duncanson painting. I'm really glad you asked about this, because a lot of times it gets glossed over, and I think it's really critical in terms of understanding the whole story that I'm pulling together. But Duncanson was, as you mentioned, a Black American painter, and he painted all of these images down in the South when there was still slavery. So before the Civil War happened. And some friends of mine started doing this research, like, why is this Black man in the South? I mean, he's literally risking his everything. It was so hostile to breed Blacks at that stage. So what was he doing? They began to realize that there was this whole pattern of Duncanson actually painting images. They were all northward paintings. They usually were waterways. There was coded in them ways to help the slaves get out of the South, to help them get onto the Underground Railroad and eventually make their way to Cincinnati, to Ohio, where they could find freedom from slavery. So it's a fascinating thing because if you look at what's happened historically with Duncanson, one of his images was used, in fact, the image on the cover of my book for Biden's inauguration, celebrated at that time. And you have all these experts saying, oh, he's just painting this scene, this placid scene.
Right.
And it wasn't that at all. Right? There was all this coded images into it. And that's what I think I compare it to feminism, because I think we've been led to believe one thing about feminism, that it's really good for women, but that's all it was for. It has all these dark corners, but that's just a part and parcel of any movement. But it's really at the heart of it is good. And I think that, Duncanson was this great foil for me to help people understand the experts can get this wrong all the time. And
Right.
when you really know what you're looking at, you see things much, much differently. And so that was one of the reasons why he was so important. And, even my publisher was like, why are you using this? Why do you want this image? And then the editor, she finally said, oh, now I understand, when she got to the last pages, why it's so important. So anyway, it was just a great way to sort of tell the story, but without all of the elements of feminism that I think kind of get so triggered by. And that was one of the things that I didn't mention, is that when I started looking at the first wave of feminism, when I wrote my book, The End of Woman, I saw the real problems with it. And many of those problems are happening and unfolding at the exact same time that Duncanson is writing. So there were all these different ways in which those paintings and that artist came together for me in this book.
Listener, you need to go get this book. You need to run to Amazon and get this book, and get it for your daughters, for your wives, for your granddaughters, for your daughter-in-laws. There's so much knowledge in here. Okay. We hear this all the time. We heard
Yeah.
first wave, second wave. I think we're on
Yeah.
third and fourth wave of feminism.
Yeah.
First wave feminism, and you do a really good job of mapping it out, but you show
Mhm.
how it was broke from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
Really.
explain that to us, please.
Yeah. So first wave feminism, it really gets dated back to 1792 when Mary Wollstonecraft wrote her work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. That's sort of the starting phase. It ends with the arrival of second wave feminism in 1963 with Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. So you have this huge swath of time that's considered the first wave of feminism. And I think, the bookends of that are Mary Wollstonecraft and Simone de Beauvoir. And you can see in dramatic ways, certainly there's going to be a huge difference between those women. That there's also a lot of commonality. And I think that was what I tried to do in this book, was to show that Wollstonecraft sort of lit this match and then tragically passes away, giving birth to her daughter, who became Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. But you have these intervening years where all of these things develop and with feminism to get you to this point where Simone de Beauvoir is sort of this, she thinks the feminine is a social construct. She thinks that, abortion needs to happen. We need to force women out of the home because they'll choose the home if they're given an option. I mean, she's really this radical woman that is remarkably, she's trying to do things that are very avant-garde. And then I think that's the irony, is that she ends up doing things very conventionally, unwittingly, that she and Jean-Paul Sartre had made this vow to one another, and they were these lifelong partners of sorts, even though they both cycled through various other people, contingent lovers, they called them. Anyway, so I don't want to get too deep into the Simone de Beauvoir, but I think that I demonstrate in understanding the first wave is that it was really trying to create a new idea of womanhood that was following a much more masculine idea, that it was denigrating the home, it was denigrating our fertility and the family. These pieces kind of set the stage for then obviously what came next with the radicalness of the second wave, and then third and fourth, the subsequent waves. So it wasn't the case that somehow the second wave was this great break or this corrupting factor. And in fact, it was actually just building on what had already been happening for a long time.
Professor Gress, do you think it could have evolved differently? The ability for women to own property and to
Mhm.
continue into advanced education was severely
Mhm.
limited at one
Mhm.
time. Do you think it could have evolved differently without feminism? That was a
Mhm.
question that as I was reading
Yeah.
through the book, in
Mhm.
a way that would have been more healthy. At some
Yeah.
point, could you
Um,
think made that decision? I mean, I was trying to
yeah.
make a decision. I couldn't decide.
Yeah, no, I think that there absolutely was another way in which, and that's one of the reasons why I used the woman Hannah More's work initially, where I'm contrasting her with Mary Wollstonecraft, because Hannah More was a contemporary of Wollstonecraft's and actually refused to read Wollstonecraft's work because she saw the damage and the problems with it initially. So 100%, I think that in terms of understanding women and the policy decisions and things like education, all of those things could have been shifted and changed through legislation and obviously changing mores. I mean, you have some really significant shifts happening culturally. So, yeah, I think that those things very much could have happened and were actually happening already. The snapshot that we get of women during that period is a post-Reformation England where David Hume's ideas of property are really taking hold. You also have this sort of Unitarian American Protestant, but it's Unitarian, so it's not even Christian vision going on simultaneously. And these are places where there really was this sense of the distorted understanding of women. But simultaneously, you have places like Maryland, where you've got Elizabeth Ann Seton founding schools for girls and starting the whole parochial system that was actually run in many respects by female religious. So I think that we look too narrowly in our understanding of what was happening. You also have, obviously, the Industrial Revolution is happening, and people have discretionary income in the way that they didn't before. So daughters and second, third, fourth sons can finally be sent to school. All of these things I think, go into it. So absolutely, I think that what feminism did was it tried to solve the problem of this discontent and in many respects, the abuse of women by making women less like women, by trying to take away what they perceived as vulnerabilities and making women more like men. And in that's really what their solution was. And obviously, human nature is much more static than they realized. And
Right,
this is why we're seeing
right,
the backlash and why
right.
women are so unhappy, because it simply doesn't work.
Yeah, and I tell you, you just boy, you nail it on the head, because, I mean, you still see that today and it's what's so insidious about feminism is people don't even realize that they've bought into it. It's your Duncanson painting. They don't know what they're looking at. It's there, it's on in every background.
Mhm,
It's pernicious. It's
mhm,
insidious. And I tell you, I cannot help but look at the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
mhm.
Think of that as, I mean, that is the extreme, taking it to the extreme end, because I was looking at it today. I said, I got to look at the statistics. It was young women. They weren't even young women. They were girls, young teenagers to mid teenagers.
Mm,
Most of them came from broken homes. There
yeah,
was no father. They were picked because they were socially vulnerable by other women, recruiting them. Wow. That is a long, dangerous trail. It
yeah.
really is, but you can see it.
Well, and I think that what you just said hits on something very important because one of the things that feminism compared itself early on was this idea of slavery, that women were enslaved the way that Black slaves were in the South and in England and Europe. And this is the real problem is because of these distortions, we've just created a new kind of slavery. And they believed it was Christianity that was used by men to enslave women. And this is what we're seeing now is this, first of all, that the abuse hasn't stopped. It's only worsened and heightened, obviously,
Right.
through things like sex trafficking and whatnot. The point is that we have now this slavery of use and degradation that absolutely came because of feminism and because of the way in which even sexuality has been so distorted, trying to get rid of monogamy as some kind of vital and essential piece for a thriving civilization. When you get rid of that, and actually I talk about this in my book, The End of Woman, when you get rid of the concept that monogamy is important, a civilization usually has about 3 generations that it will last. And after that, it will crumble and has to be taken over by something else. And, if you look at 1960 as sort of that starting point where monogamy ended, we're not very, we're not very far from that. I think you can see very clearly why this disintegration is happening, and it feels like very rapid. And the Epstein, I think, is sort of underscores everything because you just realize that content is just absolutely unbelievable. But you realize how bad things are and how much has been hidden in plain sight, what it is that we've really been dealing with all of these years with this true degradation and denigration of women.
It would be one thing if we were victims, but we're not victims of it. We
Mhm,
agreed. We went
mhm,
along with it happily.
mhm.
Take those birth control pills, hook up,
Yeah,
Tinder time, all of that. Put career ahead of family. We're not victims here, and women are not victims.
yeah.
Women have absolutely they volunteered for this. They've signed up for all of this,
Mhm.
and it's not good.
Well,
So
and that's the tragedy too, is that, who did this come from? It came from our grandmothers and our mothers and those generations. Obviously, at a certain stage, you know that there's sort of this invincible ignorance and it passes through the different generations. But when we've gotten to this point where we can really see the negative fruit of it, it begs the question, why are we maintaining this? And I think this is one of the things that I see in the church so much, an issue. Like, why are we hanging on to this language when we know what it's doing is facilitating in the image, in the minds of other Catholics that somehow women really are these victims that need some sort of special status because men are victimizers. And that's an incredibly Marxist set of terms. John Paul II never used those terms and never would agree to that idea. And yet this is one of the reasons why it continues in the church, is the sense of, oh, women have to have feminism. Well, why? We don't have masculinism. We don't have sort of childism. What is it that is so important about that? And again, it comes back to this idea that women have some kind of victimhood status, which I would say is different than vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities need to be recognized and cared for, but the way that you do that is through a strong church, strong men, and not by pushing away the very thing, which is masculinity and the gifts that men have to be able to protect and provide for women. That's the real tragedy, is that in addition to destroying the womanhood, we've also destroyed men. And we're seeing certainly a lot of that backlash in the culture today as well.
Absolutely. John Paul II was brilliant. I'm a canon lawyer because of him. In 1989, he allowed all lay people to become canon lawyers. He didn't say lay women or lay men. He just allowed all lay people. When people talk to me about why women can't be priests, the idea that women are not ontologically have the same relationship with power as men do, it makes cartoon characters of women. That's saying you're less than human. Every human being has a problem with power, right? So why are we going to think that you give women power, that's going to solve the problem? You really talk about, and John Paul II talks about the genius of gender and of the voices that we have, the unusual gifts that we have. Women can see things men cannot. Men do things that women cannot. And our voices, but we don't hear each other's voices anymore. We don't respect each other's voices.
Right. No, I think that's exactly right. And, one of the things that I think is really important is getting back to this idea of understanding what it is that women is called to. And I think we are absolutely called to be life givers, to be mothers, to mother others, and to recognize that as a gift, given the fact that the church is called Holy Mother Church. The church is called a bride. We know obviously Our Lady she's both virgin and mother. To really understand that these are not social constructs, but these are deeply woven into creation by God himself. And I think when we start to step back and say, we've been talking about all this doing, what it is that women ought to do and ought not to do. But I think a lot of those questions really evaporate when you start to understand the importance of that great Edith Stein quote, women are needed not for what they do, but for who they are. Because we're called to be mothers, and not just biologically, but spiritually, emotionally, educationally, even in the healing arts. We have these incredible gifts. And I think we've spent so much time being told that we have to compete with men and we've got to sort of achieve these different degrees and career. And while at the same time, that real core element that we see even built into our bodies itself, that idea of being the first home for a child, that's what a womb is for. That has really been, I think, a mistaken piece. And that's a piece that we haven't heard for 50 years. We haven't, I know I didn't grow up hearing anything good about becoming a mother. We really have our work cut out for us to be able to start restoring what it really means to be a mother and just the incredible gift that it is. And simultaneously, the incredible gift that it is to be a man and to father, to be a father, whether it's on a spiritual level, a biological level. That protecting and providing is really essential. I've had women say, one woman in particular after a conference say, I need to go home and apologize to my husband because I've tried to do all the things that he's supposed to do. And I realized that what a mistake that's been. He's been left like one of my adult children because I've never allowed him to be who it is that God created him to be. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on all of this. But the great thing is we're not reinventing the wheel. We've got the incredible models. We have all these saints. We have all the scholarship. And it's time to start digging into that and really seeing the richness of it instead of chasing after yet one other scheme to so-called liberate women.
So, Doris, what you're saying too is that women can still be engineers. They can still be pilots. They can still be.
Yes.
They can still do all of this. It really is where in our understanding of who we are and what we bring to the table, what we bring to the family, that is privileged and it should be privileged. So you're not saying barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen.
I appreciate those things.
Actually talking something flexible and imaginative, really.
Well, and that's, I think, the exciting part about it too, is that you can imagine a woman who understands her capacity and gift to love others, She's a very different woman in the workplace when she understands that. She's magnetic. People are dying to be around that kind of maternal goodness, not a mommy dearest, not a devouring mother, not someone who's manipulating you, but a woman who's authentically giving herself to the very people around her instead of feeling like she's got to be in competition with people all the time, or she has to cut people down, or whatever it is that we know happens in the workplace all the time. If a woman comes to that workplace in a way where she understands she's meant to give this sincere gift of herself to others and be kind and help them see the best in themselves and remember birthdays and, all of those small things, that is a huge change, not only in the workplace, but also in her own experiential life, because her relationships will be deeper and richer. All of that makes her someone that people want to be around instead of what we see so much in the work culture today, which is something that people are repulsed by, are afraid of. That's never a good place to be when people are afraid of you in work or home. But I think when we sort this out and understand what it means to be providing life in the workspace, then that's going to look a lot different too, in much healthier ways.
Where do we start? How does this start?
Well, I've asked myself the question a lot. Obviously, people should read my book. I think it's really incumbent upon women to make the first step. And this is why I continued to write about this. I think a lot of people say, oh, well, it's men's fault. Well, no, actually, women were the one that changed in the 60s and 70s, especially with sexual promiscuity. So I think that's one of the key pieces is helping women understand the importance of monogamy and their fertility. That's huge. Second of all, the role of emotions. This is one of the reasons why we have such a disaster, is because we have done a great job of pointing out that, men's fundamental sin other than pride is usually lust. We've talked about this at church over and over again, but do we ever talk about envy in women? And this is a really important piece. Women are sort of naturally wired to be competitive with others because of our weakness biologically, and because of the vulnerability that we have when raising children. So we need to start looking at that and really be critical of ourselves and see, the ways in which envy is driving us and leading us to make decisions or to treat other people. That's another important piece. And then I think the third idea is really, how do we get control of our emotions so that we're not being led by them? Especially this idea of misplaced compassion, where we have this sense like, as long as I feel compassion about this, I can change the world.
Right.
There's nothing more toxic, because this is sort of what leads to the girl that works for PETA, but she's aborting her own child. It's a complete inversion of the order of creation. And God meant for women, their love to be very local. When you have children, you experience this all the time. Your hip is always being used, and your hands and your breasts and all of that body is being used, but also your face and just the way your children respond to your voice and your scent. All of those things are very, very important. But you can also see that in the richness of relationships and the way people are drawn to others through the local. And I think this is one of the reasons why the loneliness issue is so acute right now, because women have been the fabric to see, oh goodness, that person that, someone just died in the family, or that woman's about ready to have a child and she needs help. We intuit that very, very easily, and then we want to respond to it. So that's really where we need to start channeling our energies, is back to something local. And of course, we know that God, when we can be trusted in the small things, he gives us bigger things. So that's not to say that we can't ever do big things, or that women are incapable of doing big things, but just to recognize the importance of these virtues in our life and the importance of the local. And then that's not a small thing. That's not something to look down upon. And I love the quote from Mother Teresa where she says, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family, because that's really where it has to start. And we know that when women don't love their family, we're seeing the fruit of that. We've got all of this mental illness, particularly the cluster B syndromes that are attached to a deficit of affection from the ages of 0 to 3. Those are things like narcissism and histrionics and borderline personality. Those are absolutely connected with children who haven't had a primary caregiver that affirmed them properly. So this is, these are not small issues, but I think the way in which we change them doesn't have to be huge. We don't have to, again, reinvent the wheel. We just need to go back to what we know worked and back to the order that God has given us, because it's beautiful and it's compelling when it's actually understood properly and used properly.
I call toxic empathy, because women are empathetic. They're going to put their empathy somewhere. And if they have it, if they're not in a structure where they put their empathy, they're going to put it to some bad thing. You see it with masculinity too. If masculinity is not channeled right, it can go into bad things. We're human beings, and we have to have it channeled do have to
It's
tell
great.
you, one of my nieces just went to a Erica Kirk, and she came back and she told me her friends have decided they want to marry early because they don't want to waste their fertility. And I
Wow.
thought,
It's amazing. Wow.
wow, that is a
Yeah.
heck of an admission. And I
Mhm.
have comments about Erica Kirk, don't know her, don't know what her thing is, but I thought that was really, really influential. Is this the new, maybe these are the new influencers in our society because
Yeah.
they've seen the wreckage of
Yeah.
what has happened.
Well, and that's what I'm seeing a lot as well. If you're talking to Gen X or boomer women, you're going to usually hit a lot of concrete. Obviously, there's exceptions. I'm Gen X. So I think that there people are changing their minds. But among younger women, there seems to be this openness to it. They don't have the baggage of feminism the way that so many of us were raised with it. And they have seen the wreckage and they don't want that. But they've also been offered a different model, I think, that we didn't have growing up. And those are really important. This is one of the reasons why I've done my work with theology of home is to try to help women understand that the models on offer, whether it's the girl boss or the doormat of a woman with no will, that's not normal. And that's not what healthy woman, neither one of those is what healthy womanhood
Right.
looks like. So I think one of the things that we're seeing that's fascinating is that the trad wife element, which obviously it's got its own problems and can be over commercialized and whatnot. But just the fact that you have a different option than what I grew up with, I think makes a huge difference in terms of women thinking outside the box and thinking about, well, what is it that I really want and how do I move forward with this and asking the right questions. So I'm really heartened by the younger generation of women. And I think that it's just a matter of time because of the fact that they have experienced it. They were put in daycare very, very early and they don't want that for their children. And so I think that it's really beautiful. They really see the important, they don't want to be early divorced or several divorces. Those kinds of things have had a lasting effect and have not been glamorized in their life. They've really felt them intensely. So I think there's a lot of hope with the upcoming generations, especially young men too. Obviously, we've got some issues with a more radical bent where young men are really looking at women with a kind of contempt. And I think that
That's not healthy. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
not healthy at all. And I'm not endorsing that. And I think it's actually a reaction to the kind of contempt that
Right.
they've experienced from radical
It
feminism.
is,
So I think
absolutely.
it's just a mirror image of that. But by and large, it seems like there's a lot of really great young men that have their heads on straight and are really seeking for something deeper and a better truth. And this is why we're seeing so many come into the church and really convert to Christianity and take it seriously in the way that other generations haven't.
How did you get started in this?
Mhm.
How did you get started? I mean, what was the trigger that made you go down this road? So what started this for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think part of it was my own desire to see the women in my life happy, to see them love the church. Certainly that was part of it. And I actually said when I was in graduate school that I would never work on women's issues. I think I said it out loud to God one day in my kitchen. And God has a sense of humor. But part of it,
Yes.
what I didn't like about it was that I thought it was overly intellectual. And I thought these books on womanhood are absolutely not anything I could ever give to my sisters, to my mother, to my friends. This is just incredibly frustrating. And so I think that was one of the things once I finished my PhD was just the realization, first of all, that I could write books. When you write a dissertation, it's sort of not always the same thing, but I was really drawn to more popular kind of writing. And that was the desire was to sort of start looking at the culture and seeing, why is it, and especially the pro-life issue. I mean, this has been something that's been really formed in me from a very young age was this idea of why is it that we live in this culture where it's socially acceptable to kill your own child? If you look at the numbers, especially dwarfs anything that any other ideology has done. And it's done by parents of their own children. Like it's not soldiers that are foreign soldiers that are unrelated bloodlines. It's their own generation. So I think it's those kinds of things that not only led me to it, but have kept me at it and helped me realize, this is the engine behind feminism is the engine because women are
Mhm.
need to be autonomous. And therefore you have to be able to have access to abortion in order to remain autonomous and have that work opportunities or financial opportunities. So I think until we figure that out as a culture and as pro-lifers, I think we're going to just keep chasing our tail in terms of the abortion debate. But it seems like people are open to hearing this at this stage in history right now. And so it's been one of those things I didn't expect to get into, but the more I keep realizing just how wrong what it is, everything that we've been told about feminism in general, and then more specifically about Catholicism and feminism, driven me deeper and deeper into really looking at what's there and what it is that the church really stands for and teaches, and why it is so deeply incompatible with the ideology of feminism.
It really is. Autonomy and independence are not human. Interdependence is
Right.
human. Right. It's just we need each other. We live in communion. This is the human experience, folks.
Yeah.
And interdependence, we depend on each other and we have to. And being an independent woman and being an autonomous woman is deadly and lonely.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just is.
Yeah.
And
And it's a big myth too, because, this is the thing is women end up becoming married to the government or to the state. That life of Julia is not the independent woman. It's her being sustained by the state that the Obama administration was promoting. So it's really amazing. And then, we shouldn't be surprised that women are so pro liberal, radical government funded projects because that's who they're married to by and large.
absolutely. That is just, the Pew Trust came out and said that women are getting more and more radical. And
Mhm.
it all links together that
It does. Yeah.
a lot of younger women tend to be more and more radical. Wow, Dr. Gress, this book, it truly is amazing. You're such a great observer
Oh,
of what is happening now. And you give the history of what is happening now and also some hope for the future.
mm,
And folks, whether you like it or not, it probably is through the church. It can be Catholic or Protestant, but a
mm,
church that upholds traditional values, traditional
mm,
family values. This isn't old fashioned. This is just traditional where you're going to be able to flourish, grow, and have a bright and beautiful future because of the roles that we play, the proper roles, the roles of creation order. So while your book is a little dire, but it's also very full of hope. And like I said, I'm planning on spreading it among my female relatives. I'm,
perfect.
so,
Well, thank you. Well, I
and,
appreciate that.
and it'd be a good book for men to read too. So they
Yeah.
understand
I have
what.
a lot of male readers. I would say it's actually equal. It's really amazing how interested men are in this because I think feminism has really silenced men. My books have been a way for them to see like what's happened and why there's so much misery and really, have a sense of hope as well.
Right. And I'm really interested to see what happened. So we had the DEI and all of that disaster, and then we
Mhm.
had the manosphere. I want to see what comes next. And maybe the thing that comes next is maturity.
Well, one can hope, but that's the idea is that if we get back to these basic understanding and roles of masculine and feminine, it's not going to matter what the trends are. They're able to withstand that and be sustained. Trends change. There's kind of a baseline underneath that. And I think that's what's happened historically. So we need to recover the baseline or the foundation. And then on top of that, then the trends can happen and come and go. So I think that's an important piece is just how do we build this foundation again? Because you're not going to get to maturity until you have that real foundation. So yeah, we've definitely got our work cut out for us.
All right, guys, buy the book. It's the instructions. Dr. Gress, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy academic schedule. The mother of 5 children. This is a busy woman to talk to us today.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.